3 weeks had passed since Rebecca overheard that conversation, and each day felt heavier than the last. Linda had been making phone calls, always stepping outside or closing doors when Rebecca was nearby. The wedding preparations had taken over the entire house, with Linda's friends constantly coming and going, barely acknowledging Rebecca's presence as they discussed flower arrangements and seating charts. Rebecca had started keeping to her room as much as possible. It was easier than facing the reality of what was happening. She had tried to talk to her father once, catching him on a rare evening when he came home before midnight, but he had simply patted her shoulder awkwardly and said that Linda was just trying to help, that maybe a change would be good for her. He couldn't even look her in the eyes when he said it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. Linda had organized a dinner party, ostensibly to celebrate a major business deal David had closed. The dining room was full of well-dressed people, the kind who measured success in zeros on bank statements and connections to important names. Rebecca had been expected to make an appearance, to play the role of the grateful stepdaughter who was so blessed to be part of such a wonderful family. She had dressed carefully, wearing one of the few nice outfits that still fit her, trying to make herself presentable, but as she wheeled into the dining room, she caught Linda's expression, a quick flash of annoyance before the hostess' smile snapped back into place. Rebecca was seated at the far end of the table, essentially separated from the main conversations, close to the kitchen door where the catering staff kept bumping her chair as they passed. Among the guests was a rancher from Montana, a man named Tom Crawford, who supplied cattle to one of David's processing facilities. He was older, probably in his early 50s, with weathered skin that spoke of years working outdoors and gray hair that needed a trim. Unlike the other guests in their expensive suits and designer dresses, he wore a clean but simple button-down shirt and jeans. He looked uncomfortable in the formal setting, out of place among all the polished sophistication. Halfway through dinner, Rebecca excused herself, wheeling toward the bathroom. As she passed through the hallway, she heard voices coming from the library. The door was cracked open and she recognized Linda's voice, sharp with frustration. "I'm telling you, I've exhausted every reasonable option. The care facilities cost a fortune and David is finally questioning those expenses. I need someone to just take her. Give her something to do so she feels useful. She's perfectly capable mentally. Can work a computer, manage books, that sort of thing. Are you seriously trying to rehome your stepdaughter like a dog?" This voice was unfamiliar, probably one of Linda's society friends. "Don't be crude. I'm trying to find her independence. She's wasting away in that house, and frankly, we all need a fresh start. Catherine's wedding will be covered by 3 different magazines. I cannot have photographers capturing Rebecca in the background, making the whole thing look like some charity case." Rebecca's hands gripped the wheels of her chair so tightly her knuckles went white. The casual cruelty of it, the way Linda discussed her like she was an inconvenient piece of furniture, made her stomach turn. What about family? Doesn't she have aunts, cousins, anyone? Her mother's family cut ties with David after he remarried. They blamed him for moving on too quickly, as if he was supposed to stay miserable forever. And David's siblings are scattered across the country with their own lives. No one wants a paralyzed relative disrupting their comfortable existence. Rebecca backed away from the door before she could hear more. She didn't return to the dinner party. Instead, she went to her room and locked the door, letting the tears come freely for the first time in months. What Rebecca didn't know was that Tom Crawford had also stepped away from the dinner table, looking for a quiet place to take a phone call from his ranch manager. He had passed by that same library door and heard enough of Linda's conversation to make his blood boil. He stood there for a moment, processing what he'd heard, his jaw clenched tight. Tom knew what it was like to lose someone. His daughter had died in a car accident 7 years ago, just 19 years old, full of dreams and plans that would never be realized. His wife had passed 5 years before that from a long illness, leaving him alone on the ranch they had built together. He had spent years working himself half to death, trying to outrun the grief, trying to fill the silence of that empty house with the sounds of cattle and horses and endless labor. He returned to the dinner table but barely participated in the rest of the evening's conversations. His mind was elsewhere, working through an idea that was either incredibly generous or completely foolish. When the party finally wound down and guests began leaving, Tom approached David Mitchell. "Got a minute to talk business?" Tom asked, his Montana drawl more pronounced than usual. David looked surprised but nodded, leading Tom to his office. Linda tried to follow, but David waved her off, telling her to see to the other departing guests. "What's on your mind, Crawford? If this is about increasing your contract, I think we can work something out." "It's not about cattle." Tom stood by the window, looking out at the manicured lawn. "It's about your daughter." David's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "Rebecca? What about her? I heard your wife talking earlier. Sounds like you're looking to find her somewhere else to live, someone to take her in." David's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "That's a private family matter. I'm sure it is. And I'm not here to judge, but I'm here to make an offer." Tom turned to face him directly. "My ranch is about 2,000 acres in Montana. I've got a big house that's mostly empty. Lost my wife and daughter years back. Been living there alone ever since. I could use help with the business side of things. Bookkeeping, managing orders, handling the website I barely know how to use. Your daughter's smart, educated, could do that kind of work easily." "You want to take Rebecca to Montana?" David looked stunned. "I'm offering her a place to live and something to do that might give her purpose. Ranch has ramps already. Built them when my wife was sick and using a walker. The work would be real, not charity. She'd be earning her keep if that matters to you." David was quiet for a long moment, and Tom could see the conflict playing across his face. Guilt warring with relief. Shame fighting against the easy solution being handed to him. "Why would you do this? You don't even know her." "Maybe that's exactly why. I don't see her as a burden or an embarrassment. I see someone who needs a chance, and I've got the space and the need for help. Seems like it could work out for everyone. I'd need to think about it, discuss it with my wife." "Your wife is the one trying to give her away in the first place," Tom said bluntly. "This is about what's best for your daughter, not what's easiest for your household." The next week moved in a blur that Rebecca could barely process. Linda had seized on Tom's offer with barely concealed enthusiasm. David had presented it to Rebecca as an opportunity, a chance for independence and purpose. They made it sound like an adventure, like she was choosing this instead of being pushed into it. Rebecca knew the truth. She had no real choice. She could refuse and make everything more difficult, draw out the inevitable, or she could accept and at least maintain some dignity. So she agreed, numb and detached, watching as her life was packed into boxes and loaded into a truck. On the morning she left, her father hugged her stiffly and promised to visit soon. They both knew he wouldn't. Linda smiled and said encouraging things about fresh starts and new chapters. Catherine didn't even come downstairs to say goodbye. Tom arrived in a truck that had seen better days, loaded Rebecca's things efficiently, and helped her into the passenger seat with a matter-of-fact courtesy that was somehow worse than pity would have been. As they pulled away from the only home she'd ever known, Rebecca didn't look back. She couldn't bear to see if anyone was watching her leave, or worse, if no one was. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the expensive Persian carpet in the Mitchell family's living room. 23-year-old Rebecca sat in her wheelchair near the bay window, her fingers tracing patterns on the armrest as she watched the neighborhood children play outside. 5 years had passed since the accident that changed everything. 5 years since that beautiful summer day when her horse had been spooked by a snake, throwing her against a fence post with such force that her spine had shattered. Life before the accident felt like a distant dream now. Rebecca had been vibrant, adventurous, always the first one ready for any challenge. She had competed in equestrian events across 3 states, won ribbons and trophies that now gathered dust in boxes somewhere in the attic. Her mother had been so proud, standing at every event with a camera, cheering louder than anyone else in the crowd. But her mother was gone now too, taken by cancer just 2 years after the accident, leaving Rebecca alone with her father and his new wife. The house had changed since Linda became Mrs. Mitchell. The warm, lived-in feeling had been replaced with cold perfection. Everything was white and cream and spotless. The family photos that once lined the hallways had been replaced with abstract art that meant nothing to anyone. Rebecca's bedroom had been moved to the first floor, tucked away in what used to be her father's study, as if hiding her away from the rest of the house. Linda had insisted it was for practical reasons, but Rebecca knew the truth. She was an inconvenience, a reminder of the first Mrs. Mitchell, a burden that didn't fit into Linda's carefully curated life. Rebecca's father, David Mitchell, had built his fortune in agricultural technology. He owned processing plants, distribution centers, and had his hands in half the farming operations in the tri-state area. Before the accident, he'd been present, engaged, always making time for his daughter despite his busy schedule. Now he buried himself in work, leaving earlier each morning and returning later each night. When he was home, he barely looked at Rebecca, as if the sight of her wheelchair filled him with a guilt he couldn't face. The sound of heels clicking on hardwood floors made Rebecca tense. Linda appeared in the doorway, perfectly dressed as always, her blonde hair styled in a way that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. She held her phone in one hand, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the screen. Still sitting by the window, "I see," Linda said, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she used whenever anyone else might be listening.
"You really should try to be more active, dear."
"All this sitting can't be good for you." Rebecca bit back the response that formed in her mind. Linda knew perfectly well that sitting was unavoidable when you couldn't walk. The physical therapy sessions had stopped 8 months ago, when Linda convinced David they were too expensive and not showing enough progress. The adaptive equipment Rebecca needed for exercise had been temporarily moved to the garage to make room for Linda's home gym. "I was just getting some fresh air," Rebecca replied quietly, hating how small her voice sounded. Linda moved into the room, her expression shifting to something calculating. "Your father and I have been talking. Catherine's wedding is in 6 weeks and we have so much to prepare. The house will be full of guests, caterers coming and going, dress fittings, all the chaos that comes with planning a proper wedding." Catherine was Linda's daughter from her first marriage, a year younger than Rebecca but worlds apart in every other way. She was getting married to some lawyer from a prestigious firm, the kind of wedding that would be featured in society magazines. Linda had been planning it for months, turning the entire household upside down with her obsessive attention to every detail. "I understand," Rebecca said, though she wasn't sure where this was going. "The thing is, dear, we're concerned about how you'll manage with all the commotion. You need your quiet, your routine, and frankly, having to work around your wheelchair with all the decorators and staff coming through will be quite difficult." Linda perched on the edge of the sofa, smoothing her skirt. "We've been thinking it might be time for you to explore more independent living arrangements." The words hung in the air like a slap. Rebecca felt her chest tighten. "Independent living? You mean you want me to leave?" "Don't be dramatic. We want what's best for you. There are wonderful facilities that specialize in caring for people with your condition. You'd have professional support, activities designed for your abilities, people your own age in similar situations. You want to put me in a home." Rebecca's voice cracked despite her effort to stay calm. "I want you to have the care you deserve, which frankly we're not equipped to provide anymore. Your father works constantly. I have responsibilities with the wedding and my charity work, and you're here alone most of the day anyway. Wouldn't it be better to be somewhere with actual support?" Rebecca wheeled herself away from the window, facing Linda directly. "This is my home. My mother lived here. My memories are here." Linda's mask slipped slightly, irritation flashing across her features. "Your mother is gone, Rebecca, and this is my home now. I've been patient, I've tried to make this work, but the truth is you're 23 years old. Most people your age have moved out already. The fact that you have special needs doesn't change that you need to start building your own life. My father would never agree to this." "Your father already has, dear. He thinks it's for the best. We've actually already started looking into options." Linda stood, checking her phone again. "We just want you to be happy and cared for properly. Surely you can understand that." After Linda left, Rebecca sat frozen in place, her mind reeling. Her father had agreed to this, without even talking to her. The betrayal cut deeper than anything physical ever could. She had lost her ability to walk, then her mother, and now she was losing her home, her family, everything that connected her to the person she used to be. That evening, she heard them talking in her father's office. The door wasn't completely closed and their voices carried down the hallway. Rebecca wheeled closer, hating herself for eavesdropping but needing to know the truth. "The facilities are also expensive," Linda was saying. "Thousands per month, and for what? She just sits around anyway. There has to be another option. What do you suggest?" Her father's voice sounded tired, defeated. "I've been asking around discreetly, of course. Someone must need help. Maybe an elderly person who needs companionship or a family that needs assistance with bookkeeping or something she could do from a desk. We could frame it as giving her independence a chance to be useful again. You want to give away my daughter like she's a piece of furniture? I want a solution that works for everyone. David, she's miserable here, you're never around to help her. And I cannot manage a paralyzed stepdaughter and plan Catherine's wedding and maintain everything else. Something has to give. There was a long silence. Rebecca held her breath, praying her father would stand up for her. Would tell Linda this was insane, would remember the little girl he used to push on swings and teach to ride horses. Fine, he finally said. Make some inquiries, but be discreet. I don't want this becoming gossip for your friends. Rebecca backed away from the door, her hands shaking on the wheels of her chair. Her own father had just agreed to give her away. Not to a facility where she'd at least have professional care, but to whoever would take her off their hands, like she was a burden they were dumping at a shelter. That night, Rebecca lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tears sliding silently down her temples into her hair. She had survived the accident, survived losing the use of her legs, survived her mother's death, but she wasn't sure she could survive being unwanted by the only family she had left. Outside her window, the autumn wind rattled the branches against the glass, and Rebecca wondered where she would be when winter came. She wondered if anywhere in the world would ever feel like home again. And she wondered if her father would even notice when she was gone. The drive to Montana took 2 full days. Tom Crawford wasn't much of a talker, which suited Rebecca fine. She spent most of the journey staring out the window, watching the landscape change from suburban sprawl to farmland to the vast, open country of the Mountain West. The silence between them wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was just empty, like everything else in Rebecca's life had become. They stopped at cheap motels, the kind with flickering neon signs and rooms that smelled like old carpet and cleaning products. Tom always got her settled first, making sure the room was accessible before bringing in her things. He was efficient about it, practical, never fussing or treating her like she was fragile. Rebecca couldn't decide if she appreciated that or resented it. When they finally turned off the highway onto a long dirt road, Rebecca got her first view of what would be her new home. Crawford Ranch stretched out across rolling hills, fenced pastures dotted with cattle, and in the distance, mountains that still held snow on their peaks even though it was autumn. The ranch house itself was large but worn, a 2-story structure with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. The paint was fading and some of the shutters hung crooked, but it looked solid, built to withstand harsh winters and hot summers. Tom pulled the truck up to the front steps and killed the engine. Home sweet home, he said without much emotion. Built the ramps about 8 years ago. Should work fine for your chair. Rebecca looked at the ramps he mentioned, sturdy wooden structures that led up to the porch. They looked well maintained, recently swept clean of leaves and debris. Tom unloaded her wheelchair and helped her transfer from the truck with the same matter-of-fact efficiency he'd shown all along. No pity, no excessive gentleness, just getting the job done. Inside, the house was clean but sparse. The furniture was functional rather than decorative, most of it looking like it had been there for decades. The walls held a few photographs, including one of a young woman with Tom's eyes and a bright smile. Rebecca didn't ask, but she understood. This was the daughter he'd lost. Your room's on the first floor, Tom said, leading her down a hallway. Used to be a den, but I converted it after my wife got sick. Private bathroom attached, everything should be accessible. The room was larger than Rebecca expected, with big windows that looked out over the western pastures. The furniture was simple but good quality. A bed, a dresser, a desk with an old computer. It was clean and impersonal, ready for occupation but without any warmth or character. Bathrooms through there? Tom pointed to a door on the far wall. Got grab bars installed, roll-in shower, all that. Should have everything you need. Thank you, Rebecca said quietly, because it seemed like something should be said. Tom nodded. I'll bring your boxes in. Dinner's at 6, nothing fancy. We eat in the kitchen mostly. Ranch hands usually join us, hope that's all right. After he left, Rebecca sat alone in her new room and felt the weight of her situation settle over her like a heavy blanket. This was it. This was her life now. Exiled to a Montana ranch in the middle of nowhere, living with a stranger who'd taken her in out of some sense of obligation, or guilt or whatever motivated people to make decisions like that. That first dinner was awkward in ways that made Rebecca wish she could disappear. The kitchen table was large and old, scarred from years of use, and seated around it were Tom, Rebecca, and 3 ranch hands. The men were polite but clearly uncomfortable, not sure how to act around a paralyzed woman at their dinner table. They kept their eyes on their plates mostly, answering Tom's questions about the day's work in short sentences. The food was simple but good. Beef stew with fresh bread, the kind of meal meant to fuel hard work rather than impress anyone. Rebecca picked at hers, her appetite gone, feeling like an intruder in this space where she clearly didn't belong. After dinner, Tom didn't let her retreat to her room. Instead, he set her up at a desk in his office, showed her the disaster of his bookkeeping system, and explained what needed to be done. "Records are a mess," he admitted without embarrassment. "I'm good with cattle and horses, not so much with paperwork. Need someone to make sense of this, get it organized, figure out what I actually made and spent this year. Tax season's coming up, and my accountant charges me double because everything's such a disaster when I hand it over." Rebecca looked at the stacks of receipts, invoices, and random papers stuffed into boxes and folders. "This is months of work, probably, but you've got time and I need it done. That's the deal. You help run the business side of things and you've got a place here." There was no sympathy in his voice, no allowance made for her situation. He was treating her like an employee, someone with a job to do regardless of personal circumstances. Part of Rebecca wanted to argue, to throw his lack of compassion in his face. But another part, the part that was tired of being treated like a fragile victim, responded to the straightforwardness of it. "Fine, I'll need supplies. A better computer system, filing cabinets. Make a list. I'll get what you need." The first week was brutal. Rebecca worked on the books during the day, slowly making sense of Tom's chaotic record-keeping. At night, she lay in her unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch, feeling more alone than she ever had in her life. The ranch was isolated miles from the nearest town, surrounded by vast spaces that made her feel small and insignificant. Tom wasn't cruel, but he wasn't warm either. He treated her with the same practical courtesy he showed his ranch hands, expecting her to pull her weight, giving her tasks without consideration for what she might have been through. When she struggled with something, he didn't rush to help. He waited, letting her figure it out, stepping in only if it became clear she genuinely couldn't manage. It was infuriating. Rebecca was used to being either pitied or ignored, but Tom did neither. He just expected her to function, to contribute, to be useful. There was no accommodation for her feelings, no gentle handling of her emotional state. When she was short with him one morning, snapping at a question about supply orders, he simply looked at her evenly and said, "Having a bad day is fine. Taking it out on others isn't. Try again." She'd wanted to scream at him, to tell him he had no idea what she was going through, that he couldn't possibly understand what it felt like to be unwanted by your own family, thrown away like trash. But the words died in her throat because there was something in his eyes, a deep well of old pain that suggested he understood loss better than she wanted to admit. The isolation was the hardest part. Back home, as miserable as it had been, there had at least been the sounds of life around her. Here there was nothing but wind and cattle, and the occasional conversation between ranch hands who treated her politely but kept their distance. She had no friends here, no connections, nothing familiar to hold on to. One particularly difficult evening. About 10 days in, Rebecca found herself crying in her room, finally letting out all the anger and hurt and fear she'd been holding in. She cried for her mother, for her legs, for the family that gave her away, for the life she'd lost and the bleak future that stretched ahead. She cried until her throat was raw and her head ached, until there was nothing left inside but empty exhaustion. There was a knock on her door. "You decent?" Tom's voice called. "Go away," Rebecca managed. "Can't do that. Come on, open up." She wheeled to the door and opened it, not caring that her face was blotchy and her eyes were swollen. Tom stood there holding 2 mugs of coffee, his expression unreadable. "Heard you from the kitchen," he said, not unkindly. "Figured you could use this." He handed her a mug and invited himself in, settling into the chair by her desk. Rebecca wanted to be angry at the intrusion, but she was too tired. "I know this isn't what you wanted," Tom said after a moment. "I know you feel like you got dumped here, and you're probably right. What your stepmother did was wrong, and your father should have stood up for you better. But here's the thing. Feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to change anything." "That's easy for you to say." "Is it?" Tom's voice was sharp. I lost my wife to cancer. Watched her waste away over 2 years. Couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Then my daughter, my only child, got killed by a drunk driver on her way home from college. I spent 3 years after that wishing I'd died instead of them, working myself half to death trying to outrun the grief. So don't tell me I don't understand pain. Rebecca stared at him, shocked into silence. But here's what I learned, Tom continued, his voice gentler now. Pain doesn't give you permission to give up. You can sit in this room and cry about everything you lost, or you can figure out what you've still got and build something with it. Your choice. He stood to leave, pausing at the door. For what it's worth, I didn't take you in out of pity. I did it because I saw something in you that reminded me of my daughter, stubborn and smart and stronger than you think. Don't prove me wrong. After he left, Rebecca sat with his words echoing in her mind. She was angry at him for his bluntness, for refusing to let her wallow in her misery. But she was also reluctantly a little bit grateful, because he was right. She could give up or she could fight. And despite everything, Rebecca wasn't ready to give up yet. Something shifted in Rebecca after that night. She couldn't say exactly what it was. Maybe just exhaustion from fighting against her circumstances. Or maybe Tom's words had struck deeper than she wanted to admit. Either way, she stopped resisting the ranch and started actually looking at it. She threw herself into organizing Tom's business records with a focus that surprised her. The work was challenging in a way that engaged her mind, forcing her to puzzle through years of disorganized paperwork, receipts stuffed in shoeboxes, invoices filed by approximate date rather than any real system. It was a disaster, but it was a disaster she could fix. Rebecca started by creating a simple spreadsheet system, categorizing expenses and income, tracking which buyers purchased which cattle and at what prices. As she worked through the records, patterns emerged. She noticed that Tom was underselling his cattle compared to market rates, that he was loyal to buyers who'd been with him for years even when they weren't offering competitive prices. She saw expenses that could be reduced, inefficiencies in how supplies were ordered and stored. One evening, about 3 weeks into her stay, she wheeled into the kitchen where Tom was reviewing the next day's work schedule with his lead ranch hand. A quiet man named Pete. I need to talk to you about your pricing, Rebecca said without preamble. Tom looked up, surprised. My pricing? You're losing money. At least 15% below market value on your cattle sales. The Hendersons haven't raised their offer in 3 years, but beef prices have gone up significantly. You're basically giving them a discount out of loyalty. Pete whistled low. Tom's expression was unreadable. The Hendersons have been buying from me for 20 years. And that's great, but loyalty should go both ways. They're taking advantage of you. Rebecca rolled forward, setting her laptop on the table so he could see the spreadsheet she'd created. Look, I've compared your sales to market reports for the past 5 years. You could be making substantially more if you negotiated better or found new buyers. Tom studied the numbers, his jaw working as he processed what she was showing him. You did all this? It's just basic analysis. But Tom, there's more. Your feed costs are too high because you're buying in smaller quantities more frequently. If you bulk purchase at the start of each quarter, you'd save thousands. And your equipment maintenance costs are through the roof because you're doing emergency repairs instead of preventive maintenance. I can set up a maintenance schedule that would cut those costs significantly. Pete was grinning now. She's got you there, boss. I've been telling you for years we need a better system. Tom leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. For a moment, Rebecca worried she'd overstepped, that he'd be offended by her pointing out his mistakes, but then a slow smile spread across his weathered face. All right, Mitchell, you've got my attention. What else you got? Over the next few weeks, Rebecca became increasingly involved in the ranch operations. Tom started consulting her on decisions, asking her opinion on purchases, letting her negotiate with suppliers over the phone. She discovered she had a knack for it, finding that her educated voice and sharp mind caught people off guard, making them more willing to offer better deals than they might have to a rancher calling himself. The ranch hands, initially wary, began warming to her presence. They appreciated that her organizational systems made their work easier, that supplies were now ordered before they ran out instead of in last-minute panic. Pete started bringing his lunch to eat at the desk near her workspace, making conversation about his kids, treating her like a normal person rather than a fragile guest. But the real turning point came on a cold night in late October. Rebecca was working late in the office, finalizing a new website design she'd been building for the ranch. Tom's online presence had been essentially non-existent, just a single outdated page with basic contact information. She was creating something professional, with photos of the ranch, information about their cattle breeding program, and an easy way for potential buyers to contact them. She heard the commotion from the barn, raised voices and urgent movement. Wheeling to the window, she saw lights on in the foaling barn and several figures moving quickly. Something was wrong. Rebecca made her way outside, the cold night air biting at her face. The ramp was slick with the evening's frost, and she had to move carefully. At the barn, she found Tom and Pete working over a pregnant mare who was clearly in distress. "The foal's breech," Tom said tersely, not looking up. "Vet's an hour away, stuck helping with an emergency surgery. We've got to handle this ourselves." The mare was thrashing, her eyes rolling with fear and pain. Tom's hands were bloody as he tried to turn the foal, his face tight with concentration and worry. "What can I do?" Rebecca asked. "Nothing. Stay back, it's not safe." "Tom, I can help. Tell me what you need." He shot her a frustrated look, clearly wanting to argue, but another contraction hit the mare and he was forced to focus. "Fine. There's a medical kit on the wall, blue box. Bring it here, and grab those towels from the shelf." Rebecca moved quickly, grateful that the barn was level and accessible. She brought the supplies, then positioned herself where she could reach what Tom needed without getting in the way. As he worked, she monitored the mare's vital signs using equipment from the kit, calling out heart rate and breathing patterns. She'd learned this years ago, back when she was competing and spent hours in barns, but she'd never thought that knowledge would be useful again. "Heart rate's climbing," she warned. "She's getting too stressed." "I know, I'm almost there. Just need to. Got it." Tom's face was set in concentration as he carefully maneuvered the foal. "Come on, girl. You can do this." The next hour was tense and exhausting. Rebecca held the mare's head, talking to her softly, trying to keep her calm while Tom worked. Pete assisted with the physical labor, following Tom's instructions precisely. When the foal finally emerged, silent and still, Rebecca's heart sank. But Tom immediately began working on it, clearing airways, stimulating breathing, his movements sure and practiced. "Come on, baby. Come on." Tom's voice was rough with emotion, then a gasp, a shudder. The foal's chest began to rise and fall. The mare nickered softly, trying to lift her head to see her baby. Relief flooded through the barn like a physical wave. "We did it," Pete said, his voice awed. Tom sat back on his heels, exhausted and covered in blood and birth fluids, but grinning. He looked at Rebecca with something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Respect maybe, recognition. "Good work, Mitchell. Couldn't have done it without you." Rebecca felt something warm unfold in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Pride, usefulness, purpose. The next morning, Tom found her in the office early, already back at work despite having gotten only a few hours of sleep. "How's the mare?" she asked. "Doing great. Foal's healthy, strong. Been thinking about a name for her." He paused, looking almost uncomfortable. "Thought I'd call her Becca's Hope, if that's all right with you." Rebecca felt tears sting her eyes, but they were different from the ones she'd shed in her first weeks here. "I'd like that. You were good last night. Calm under pressure, knew what needed doing. Made me realize I've been seeing you wrong." Tom shifted his weight, clearly not comfortable with emotional conversations. "When I brought you here, thought I was doing you a favor, giving you a place to land. But you've been doing me favors since you got here. You're making this ranch run better than it has in years. I'm just organizing what was already here. No, you're bringing something new. Fresh eyes, smart thinking, and more guts than you give yourself credit for." He cleared his throat. "What I'm trying to say is, you're not a charity case here. You're earning your place fair and square. Want to make sure you know that." After he left, Rebecca sat quietly, absorbing his words. She looked around the office at the filing system she'd created, the organized desk, the new computer setup Tom had purchased based on her recommendations. She thought about the mare and foal in the barn, about the website she was building, about the improved profit margins in the spreadsheets on her screen. For the first time since her accident, Rebecca felt like she was contributing something real, not just existing, not just being cared for, but actually building something, being part of something that mattered. The ranch wasn't just Tom's anymore. In some small way, it was becoming hers too. She pulled up the website design and got back to work, a small smile playing at her lips. Outside her window, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The cattle were calling to each other in the distance, and somewhere in the barn, a foal named after her was taking its first wobbly steps. Maybe, just maybe, this place could become home after all. Winter arrived in Montana with a vengeance, bringing snow that transformed the ranch into a white wilderness. Rebecca had never experienced winters like this. Back home, snow was an occasional novelty that shut everything down for a day or two. Here it was a fact of life that required constant adaptation and hard work. But something had changed in Rebecca. The work with the mare had awakened something she thought she'd lost forever, a sense of competence, of being needed for more than just sympathy. She threw herself into the ranch operations with increasing confidence, taking on more responsibilities as Tom recognized her capabilities. The new website went live in early December, and the response exceeded anyone's expectations. Within the first week, they had inquiries from buyers in 5 different states. Rebecca had included professional photos of the ranch that Pete's teenager had taken with a decent camera, detailed information about their breeding program, and testimonials from long-term buyers. The site made Crawford Ranch look legitimate and professional, not just a small operation struggling to get by. "We got another inquiry," Rebecca called from the office one morning. "Buyer from Colorado interested in purchasing 20 head for their organic beef program. They're offering 20% above what we got from the Hendersons last quarter." Tom appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, eyebrows raised. 20%? They saw our feeding program details on the website, liked that we use minimal antibiotics and rotate pastures naturally. Organic and sustainable are big selling points right now. Rebecca turned her chair to face him. "I think we should consider marketing specifically to these buyers. We could get certified organic, command even higher prices. That's a lot of paperwork and certification costs. I've already looked into it. We're basically following organic practices anyway. The certification would just make it official and open up a whole new market tier." She pulled up her research on the screen. The certification costs would be recovered in the first 2 sales at these premium prices. Tom studied the numbers, then shook his head with a slight smile. 3 months ago, I thought I was doing you a favor bringing you here. Now I'm wondering how I ran this place without you." The praise warmed Rebecca more than she wanted to admit. She'd started to realize that Tom's gruff exterior hid a deeply good man, who'd been running on autopilot since his family died, going through the motions, but not really living. Slowly, almost without either of them noticing, they were bringing each other back to life. December brought another surprise. Tom mentioned one evening that he had some old riding equipment in the back of the barn, stuff his wife had used before she got too sick. Rebecca had been carefully avoiding the topic of horses since arriving, the pain of what she'd lost still too raw. But something made her ask to see it. In a dusty corner of the barn covered by tarps, Tom showed her what he'd kept. A specialized saddle, riding equipment modified for someone with mobility limitations, straps and supports that would help a rider with balance issues stay mounted safely. Had these custom made when Margaret was still trying to ride? Tom explained. Cost a fortune, but it gave her a few more months doing what she loved before things got too bad. Never had the heart to sell them. Rebecca's hands trembled as she touched the leather. "I haven't been on a horse since my accident. Didn't figure you had. But I've been watching you watch the horses. You miss it, it was true." Rebecca found herself drawn to the paddock rails whenever she had a break, watching the horses move, remembering what it felt like to be in sync with such a powerful animal. The longing was physical, an ache in her chest for something she thought she'd never have again. "I don't know if I can." "Won't know unless you try. There's a woman about an hour from here, runs a therapeutic riding program. She's worked with folks recovering from all kinds of injuries. Could give you some lessons, help you figure out if it's possible." The first lesson was terrifying. The instructor, a patient woman named Carol, had seen everything and wasn't impressed by fear or self-doubt. She assessed Rebecca's core strength, her balance, her ability to use her upper body to compensate for her paralyzed legs. "You've got good muscle tone in your upper body," Carol observed. "Better than most people I work with. You've been doing your physical therapy?" Rebecca nodded, not mentioning that most of that strength came from wheeling herself around a 2,000-acre ranch all day, refusing to let Tom's occasional offers of help make her dependent. They started with a gentle mare named Daisy, patient and steady. With Carol's help and the specialized equipment, Rebecca mounted for the first time in 5 years. The moment she was in the saddle, secured by the safety straps but still feeling the living warmth of the horse beneath her, something broke open inside her chest. Tears streamed down her face as Daisy walked slowly around the ring, Carol walking alongside with a lead rope. "I'm riding," Rebecca whispered, almost unable to believe it. "I'm actually riding." Tom had driven her to the lesson but stayed in the truck, giving her privacy for what he knew would be an emotional experience. When she came out an hour later, her face glowing despite the tear tracks, he just nodded and said, "Good for you, Mitchell." Over the following weeks, Rebecca's riding improved rapidly. Carol was impressed by how quickly she regained her skills, adapting to the equipment and learning to ride in a new way. Soon she was riding independently, even doing some basic work around the ranch from horseback. Tom had a mounting ramp built near the barn, allowing her to get on and off horses with minimal assistance. The ranch hands were amazed, respectful in a new way. Pete admitted he'd never expected to see her on a horse, and the respect in his voice made Rebecca stand a little taller. But Rebecca's contributions went beyond the business side and her renewed riding. Her background in equestrian sports proved invaluable in other ways. One afternoon, a potential buyer came to look at horses Tom was selling. The man was trying to claim the horses were younger than they were, had better bloodlines, justify a lower price by pointing out supposed flaws. Rebecca wheeled up during the negotiation and calmly corrected every false claim the buyer made. She identified the horses' actual bloodlines from their physical characteristics, pointed out quality traits the buyer was overlooking, and cited recent sales of comparable horses that supported Tom's asking price. The buyer, flustered at being called out by a woman in a wheelchair who clearly knew more about horses than he did, ended up paying full price. "Where'd you learn all that?" Tom asked after the buyer left. "Spent my whole childhood around horses. My mom made sure I learned everything. Not just how to ride, but breeding, conformation, bloodlines, all of it. I competed in shows across 3 states. Had to know what I was looking at to choose the right horses." Rebecca shrugged. "Just never had a reason to use that knowledge again until now." "Well, you just made me an extra $4,000. I'd say that's a pretty good reason." As winter deepened, Rebecca found herself settling into a rhythm she'd never expected. She woke early, got herself ready, and wheeled into the kitchen where Tom already had coffee brewing. They discussed the day's work over breakfast, planning sales calls, reviewing supply orders, checking on pregnant cattle or horses that needed monitoring. The office had become her domain. She'd reorganized everything, implemented systems that made the ranch run smoothly, built relationships with buyers and suppliers who now called asking for her specifically. She managed the books, handled marketing, coordinated sales, and even started writing a blog for the website about ranch life that attracted surprising attention. One evening, Tom came into the office with a folder. "Need to show you something." Inside were legal documents. "Partnership papers, what's this?" Rebecca asked, confused. "Been thinking about this for a while. You're not just helping out around here anymore, Mitchell. You're running half this operation, and the half you run is making more money than it ever has. Doesn't seem right that you're just getting room and board." "Tom, I don't need—" "It's not about need. It's about what's fair. I'm offering you a 20% stake in the ranch. You'll get a share of the profits, have a say in major decisions. This place is doing better because of you, and you should benefit from that." Rebecca stared at the papers, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say. Say yes, or negotiate for 25%. You've earned it either way." She looked up at him. This gruff rancher who'd taken her in when her own family threw her away, who'd refused to let her give up, who'd pushed her to discover strength she didn't know she had. He wasn't looking at her with pity or charity. He was looking at her like a business partner, an equal, someone whose contributions mattered. 20% is fair," she said, her voice steady. "Thank you, Tom, for everything." He nodded, uncomfortable with emotion as always. "Don't thank me. You earned it. Now sign those papers before I change my mind and realize I'm giving away part of my ranch to someone who showed up here just a few months ago." As Rebecca signed the partnership agreement, she realized something profound. She'd come to Montana broken, discarded, believing she had nothing left to offer the world. But here on this ranch, working alongside a man who'd suffered his own losses, she discovered that her value had never been in her ability to walk. It had been in her mind, her skills, her determination. Spring came to Montana with dramatic beauty, melting snow revealing green grass underneath, wildflowers blooming across the hillsides in waves of color. Rebecca had been at the ranch for 6 months now, and it felt more like home than her father's house ever had. She'd gained muscle in her arms and shoulders from the constant work. Her skin had color from time spent outside, and there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The ranch was thriving. The organic certification had come through, and they were commanding premium prices for their cattle. The website was bringing in steady inquiries, and Rebecca had even started offering consulting services to other small ranches, looking to improve their operations. She discovered she was good at this, at taking struggling businesses and finding the inefficiencies, creating systems that worked. Tom had relaxed into their partnership, trusting her judgment more and more. They worked well together, his practical knowledge of ranching combined with her business sense and organizational skills. The ranch hands treated her like part of the team. Pete's wife had started inviting her to town for coffee, and Carol from the therapeutic riding program had become a genuine friend. Rebecca was riding regularly now, sometimes helping move cattle, other times just riding for the joy of it. She'd adapted to riding in a new way, using upper body strength and the specialized equipment to compensate for her paralyzed legs. It wasn't the same as before her accident, but in some ways it was better. She'd earned these abilities back through hard work and determination, and that made them precious. She rarely thought about her old life anymore. Her father had called twice in 6 months. Awkward conversations where he asked if she was doing okay and she gave minimal answers. Linda never called at all. Catherine had gotten married in a ceremony Rebecca saw pictures of online, all white flowers and Society magazine coverage, and Rebecca had felt nothing but relief that she hadn't been there. Then, on a warm April morning, a luxury car pulled up the long drive to the ranch. Rebecca was in the office working on quarterly tax preparations and didn't notice until she heard voices on the porch. Familiar voices that made her stomach drop. She wheeled to the window and saw them. Her father, looking older and more tired than she remembered. Linda, dressed completely inappropriately for a ranch in designer heels and a white pantsuit. And behind them, looking miserable, was Catherine. Tom met them at the door, his body language immediately defensive. Rebecca could hear their voices, but not the words. After a moment, Tom looked back toward the office, caught her eye through the window and raised his eyebrows in question. She nodded reluctantly and he let them in. "Rebecca, sweetheart." Linda swept in with false warmth, her eyes scanning the modest ranch house with barely concealed disdain. "Look at you. You look so healthy." Her father hung back, his expression guilty. "Hello, Becca, it's good to see you." "What are you doing here?" Rebecca asked, her voice flat. "Can't a family visit without an interrogation?" Linda perched on the edge of the sofa like she might catch something from it. "We've missed you terribly. The house has been so empty without you. I find that hard to believe considering you couldn't wait to get rid of me." Linda's smile tightened. "Now, Rebecca, that's not fair. We were trying to help you find independence. And look how well it worked out. You're managing just fine out here in the wilderness." Tom stood by the door, arms crossed, his expression dark. He didn't trust these people and he wasn't bothering to hide it. Rebecca's father finally stepped forward. "Becca, we need to talk to you about something important. Family business." "I don't think we have family business anymore." "Please." Catherine spoke up for the first time, her voice small. "Just hear them out." There was something in her half-sister's expression, a defeat that Rebecca had never seen before. Catherine had always been confident, privileged, secure in her place in the world. Now she looked broken. Against her better judgment, Rebecca agreed to hear them out. Tom disappeared into the kitchen but left the door open, clearly staying within earshot. The story came out in pieces, each revelation worse than the last. Catherine's perfect marriage had fallen apart within 3 months. Her lawyer husband had been involved in financial fraud, embezzling from clients, and the scandal had destroyed both their reputations. Catherine had filed for divorce, but the damage was done. Linda's social standing had crumbled, her society friends distancing themselves from the scandal. But that wasn't the worst of it. The fraud investigation had expanded, looking into David's business connections. In the process, auditors had discovered irregularities in Rebecca's trust fund. The money her mother had left her. Money that should have been untouchable, held for Rebecca's care and future. Money that Linda had been secretly accessing for years, using her position as Rebecca's guardian to authorize withdrawals for care expenses that never actually went to Rebecca's care. How much? Rebecca asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Her father couldn't meet her eyes. About $300,000. The number hung in the air like a bomb. $300,000. Her mother's legacy, meant to ensure Rebecca would always be taken care of, stolen by the woman her father had brought into their home. I didn't know, her father said quickly. Not until the audit. Linda handled all the financial arrangements for your care, and I trusted her. I should have been paying attention, but I wasn't. You're sorry? Rebecca's anger was ice cold, more frightening than shouting would have been. You're sorry that you let your wife steal from your paralyzed daughter? You're sorry that you were too busy to notice? Rebecca, please. Linda's mask was cracking, desperation showing through. It was always meant for you. I was just borrowing it, making investments that would grow your fund. I was going to pay it all back. You were gambling with my mother's money. Money she saved and protected for me, and you were going to pay it back with what? The settlement from Catherine's divorce? Your society friend's charity? The investigators want to press charges, her father said miserably. Linda could go to jail for fraud and embezzlement. But if you would just sign a statement saying you authorized the withdrawals, saying it was for your care, the charges could be dropped. And there it was. The real reason for the visit. They didn't miss her. They didn't care how she was doing. They just needed her to lie to save Linda from the consequences of her theft. You want me to commit perjury to protect the woman who stole from me? She's family, Becca. And think about what this would do to Catherine, to all of us. The scandal would destroy what's left of our reputation. Your reputation? Rebecca's laugh was bitter. You threw me away like garbage because I was inconvenient. You let your wife steal my mother's money. You didn't call for 6 months to see if I was dead or alive. And now you want me to lie under oath to protect your reputation? You're doing fine here, Linda said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. You have a place to live, work to do. You don't need the trust fund money. We do, Catherine needs it. The legal fees alone are bankrupting us. Tom appeared in the doorway. I think it's time for you folks to leave. This is a private family matter, Linda snapped. This is my house and Rebecca is my business partner. You're upsetting her and I'm asking you to leave. Becca, please. Her father tried one more time. I know I failed you. I know I should have protected you better. But I'm asking you now as your father, please help us. Rebecca looked at him for a long moment, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. He wasn't the hero of her childhood anymore, the strong father who had made her feel safe. He was just a weak man who had chosen comfort over his daughter, who had let his wife prey on his child, who was now asking her to sacrifice herself one more time for his convenience. You stopped being my father when you let her give me away, Rebecca said quietly. You stopped being family when you chose her over me, and you definitely lost any right to ask me for anything when you allowed her to steal from me. So that's it? You're going to let your own father be destroyed? No, Dad, you and Linda destroyed yourselves. I'm just refusing to go down with you. Rebecca straightened in her chair, and there was strength in her voice that hadn't been there 6 months ago. I won't sign anything. I won't lie for you. Linda stole from me and she needs to face the consequences. And you need to face the fact that you enabled it. Linda stood abruptly, her face twisted with rage. You ungrateful little... That's enough. Tom's voice was hard as stone. You need to leave now. This isn't over, Linda hissed. We'll fight this. We'll expose this place for what it is, some old man taking advantage of a vulnerable girl. Try it, Tom said calmly. I've got lawyers too. And unlike you, I haven't stolen anything. Rebecca's father made one last attempt, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. Goodbye, Dad. I hope someday you figure out what you lost when you chose her over me. But that's not my problem anymore. She watched them leave, their expensive car kicking up dust as it sped down the long driveway. Catherine looked back once, her face full of regret, but Rebecca felt nothing. These people had taken enough from her. They wouldn't get another piece. Tom came and stood beside her chair. You okay? I will be. Rebecca took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the confrontation settling on her shoulders. They actually thought I'd help them after. The lawyer Tom recommended, a sharp woman named Patricia Hayes, took one look at Rebecca's case and got angry in the professional way. that meant she was going to fight hard. Within a week, she'd filed complaints with the appropriate authorities and started the process of recovering what had been stolen. "They're going to fight this," Patricia warned during their second meeting. "Linda's hired expensive attorneys, and they're going to argue that all the withdrawals were legitimate care expenses. They'll claim you lived in their house rent-free, that they provided medical care, equipment, everything you needed." "Most of the equipment was from my mother's life insurance," Rebecca countered, "and the medical care stopped when Linda decided it was too expensive. I have documentation of all of that." Patricia smiled, the kind of smile that made Rebecca glad this woman was on her side. "Then we'll use it. But I need you to be prepared for what's coming. They're going to make this ugly. They'll try to paint you as ungrateful, claim you were adequately cared for, suggest that you're making false accusations because you're angry about being sent away. Let them try." Rebecca's voice was steady. "I know the truth and I have proof. That's enough." But it wasn't just the legal battle that was about to test Rebecca. 3 days after filing the complaints, her phone rang. It was her father, and his voice carried a desperation she'd never heard before. "Becca, please. You need to reconsider this. Linda's attorneys are talking about criminal charges, possible jail time." "Is that really what you want?" "What I want is the money Mom left for me. Money that was stolen. Come home. Come back and we'll work this out as a family. We'll pay back every penny. Set up a payment plan, whatever you need. Just drop the charges and come home." The word home felt like a trap. "I am home, Dad. This is where I live now." "On a ranch in the middle of nowhere, working for a stranger?" "Becca, you're better than that. You're a Mitchell. You belong here with your family. A family that gave me away? A family that stole from me? That's not family, Dad. That's just people who share DNA. Your stepmother made mistakes, but she's sorry. She's willing to make it right. Just give us a chance." Rebecca could hear Linda's voice in the background, coaching him on what to say. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost sad. "No, Dad, I'm not coming back and I'm not dropping the charges." There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice had hardened. "Then you're making a mistake. We'll fight this and we'll win. Linda's lawyers are the best in the state. They'll tear apart your case and your reputation. Is that what you want? To be exposed as a vindictive daughter attacking the family that took care of her? Goodbye, Dad." Rebecca ended the call, her hands shaking slightly. Tom found her sitting outside on the porch, staring at the mountains in the distance. He didn't say anything, just sat in the chair next to her and waited. "He wants me to come back," Rebecca finally said. "Drop the charges, go home, forgive and forget." "What do you want?" "I want my mother's money. I want Linda to face consequences for what she did. But more than that, I want to stay here. I want to keep building what we've started. Keep riding, keep working on the ranch." "Is that selfish?" "Why would that be selfish?" "Because part of me wonders if I should go back. Not for them, but because they're still my family. Because maybe I owe them something for the years they did take care of me." Tom was quiet for a moment, watching a hawk circle overhead. "You know what I learned when my daughter died? Family is about choice, not obligation. My daughter was blood and I loved her more than life itself. But I've got friends I consider family too. People who've stood by me when I needed it, who showed up when things got hard. That's what makes family. Not DNA, not legal ties. Choice and loyalty and showing up. They're not going to show up for me. They never have. No, they haven't, so you need to ask yourself who has. Who's been in your corner? Who's pushed you to be better? Helped you build something, treated you like you mattered?" Rebecca looked at him, this gruff rancher who'd taken a chance on a broken stranger, who'd refused to let her give up, who'd helped her discover strength she didn't know she had. She thought about Pete and the ranch hands who treated her like an equal, about Carol who'd taught her to ride again, about Patricia who was fighting for her rights. "You have," she said softly. "All of you here. You've been more family in 6 months than they were in years. Then you've got your answer." The legal battle escalated quickly. Linda's attorneys filed motions claiming Rebecca was mentally unstable, that her paralysis had left her depressed and unable to make rational decisions. They produced testimony from Linda's friends claiming Rebecca had been difficult and ungrateful, that the family had bent over backwards trying to help her. Patricia countered with medical records showing Rebecca's mental competence, financial documents proving the unauthorized withdrawals, and testimony from Tom and others at the ranch about Rebecca's capabilities and sound judgment. The local newspaper got wind of the story, and suddenly it was all over the news. Wealthy family accused of stealing from paralyzed daughter. The pressure was intense. Rebecca received calls from relatives she hadn't heard from in years, people taking sides, most of them siding with her father and Linda. They called her vindictive, cruel, ungrateful. They said she was destroying the family over money, that she should forgive and move on. But there were other calls too. Her mother's sister, who'd been cut off after speaking out against David's quick remarriage, called to offer support. "Your mother would be so proud of you," she said, crying. "She set aside that money to protect you, and you're fighting to honor that. Don't let them make you doubt yourself." One evening, about a month into the legal battle, a car pulled up to the ranch again. Rebecca tensed, expecting her father or Linda. Instead, Catherine got out, alone this time, looking smaller and more fragile than Rebecca had ever seen her. Tom met her at the door, his expression wary. "Your sister's here," he told Rebecca. "Want me to send her away?" Rebecca considered it, then shook her head. "Let her in, but stay close." Catherine came in hesitantly, perching on the edge of a chair like she might bolt at any moment. She looked around the ranch house with different eyes than Linda had, seeing the comfortable homeliness of it rather than judging its lack of luxury. "I'm not here to convince you to drop the charges," she said immediately. "I just wanted to apologize." "For what?" "For everything. For not standing up for you when Mom was treating you terribly. For being too wrapped up in my own life to notice you were hurting. For letting them send you away without fighting it." Catherine's voice broke. "I was so focused on my perfect wedding, my perfect life, that I didn't see what they were doing to you. And now my perfect life has fallen apart, and I finally understand what it feels like to be discarded." Rebecca didn't know what to say. She and Catherine had never been close. Different mothers, different personalities, different lives. But there was something genuine in her half-sister's pain now. "What do you want from me, Catherine?" "Nothing. I just wanted you to know that I believe you and I'm on your side. I told the investigators everything I know about Mom's spending, about how she talked about your trust fund like it was hers to use. I testified against her." "You did what?" "She stole from you, Rebecca. She stole your mother's legacy, and she needs to face consequences for that, even if she's my mother." Catherine wiped tears from her face. "She's going to hate me for it, probably already does. But it's the right thing to do, and I should have been doing the right thing all along." After Catherine left, Rebecca sat with Tom on the porch again, processing the conversation. "That took guts," Tom observed, testifying against her own mother. "She's trying to make up for not protecting me before. Is it working?" Rebecca thought about it. "Maybe, a little. I'm not ready to trust her yet, but it's something." The case moved forward with Catherine's testimony adding weight to Rebecca's claims. Patricia called one morning with news. "They want to settle. Linda will plead guilty to misappropriation of funds, avoid jail time with probation and restitution. You'd get your money back plus interest and legal fees." "What about the criminal charges?" "She'd have a record but no prison time." "Honestly, Rebecca, it's a good offer. Criminal trials are unpredictable, and this guarantees you get your money back." Rebecca thought about Linda, imagined her sitting in prison, and found she didn't want that. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted what was rightfully hers and the freedom to move on with her life. "I'll take the settlement, but I want one more thing. I want my father to acknowledge in writing what he allowed to happen, what he failed to protect me from. I want him to admit he failed as a parent." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "That's not usually part of these settlements. Then make it part of this one. He wants to pretend he was an innocent bystander. I want him to face what he did." It took another 2 weeks of negotiation, but finally Rebecca had everything in writing. Linda would pay back every penny she'd stolen plus interest. She'd served 2 years of probation and couldn't access any trust funds or estates during that time. And David Mitchell had signed a statement acknowledging that he'd failed in his duty to protect his daughter's interests, that he'd allowed his wife unauthorized access to Rebecca's trust, and that he took responsibility for not being the father. 2 years had passed since Rebecca came to Crawford Ranch, and the transformation was remarkable. Not just in Rebecca herself, though she was almost unrecognizable from the broken young woman who'd arrived in Tom's truck, but in the ranch itself. The therapeutic riding program had become the heart of their operation. What started as Rebecca's personal journey had evolved into something much bigger. Using a portion of her settlement money, and applying for grants that Rebecca had researched and written proposals for, They'd built a dedicated facility with an indoor arena, specialized equipment, and accessible accommodations. Every week, people came from across the state and beyond. Children with cerebral palsy, veterans dealing with PTSD, adults recovering from strokes or accidents. Rebecca had gotten certified as a therapeutic writing instructor, spending hours studying and training, determined to give others the same chance she'd been given. The program had attracted attention, featured in local news stories and writing magazines. People were inspired by the story of a paralyzed woman who'd not only learned to write again but was now teaching others to do the same. Donations came in, volunteers offered their time, and the program grew beyond anything Tom or Rebecca had initially imagined. But they hadn't abandoned the cattle operation. If anything, it was more successful than ever. The organic certification and Rebecca's marketing strategies had positioned Crawford Ranch as a premium supplier. They'd expanded their breeding program, and horses bred at the ranch were now sought after for both riding and ranch work. Rebecca managed it all with a competence that amazed even her. She'd discovered talents she never knew she had, skills that had been buried under layers of depression and self-doubt. She was a skilled negotiator, an excellent teacher, and a sharp businesswoman. The ranch wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving. Pete had been promoted to ranch manager, overseeing the day-to-day cattle operations while Rebecca focused on the business and therapeutic program. They'd hired 2 more ranch hands and 3 instructors for the writing program. What had been a struggling one-man operation was now a legitimate business employing a dozen people. One spring morning, Rebecca was working with a new student, a 10-year-old girl named Maya, who'd lost the use of her legs in a car accident 6 months earlier. The girl reminded Rebecca painfully of herself, angry and scared and convinced her life was over. "I can't do this," Maya said, tears streaming down her face as she sat on the mounting ramp, refusing to approach the gentle mare waiting patiently beside her. "I'll fall. I'll get hurt. I can't." Rebecca wheeled closer, her voice gentle but firm. "You're right, you might fall. I've fallen plenty of times. But you know what? The horse doesn't care if you can walk. She just cares if you can ride. And I know you can because I did, and I wasn't any braver than you are. You're different. You're an adult. You're strong. I'm strong now. 2 years ago, I was sitting in a wheelchair crying in my room, convinced my life was over, letting people treat me like I was broken and useless. I thought I'd never ride again, never do anything meaningful again. I was wrong about all of it." Maya looked at Rebecca with wide eyes. "Really? Really? And you know what helped me? Someone who refused to let me give up, who pushed me even when I wanted to quit, who made me see that being in a wheelchair didn't mean I was finished. I'm trying to be that person for you." It took another 20 minutes, but finally Maya agreed to try. With Rebecca guiding her through each step, using the specialized equipment and safety measures, Maya mounted the horse. The look on her face when the mare took her first steps was pure magic, fear transforming into wonder. Tom watched from the arena rail, that slight smile he got when he was proud, but trying not to show it. When the lesson ended and Maya's parents picked her up, the girl was talking excitedly about next week's lesson, about learning to trot, about maybe competing someday. "You're good at this," Tom said as Rebecca wheeled over to join him. "I had a good teacher. Someone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I just gave you space. You did the rest." They'd had this conversation in various forms dozens of times over the past 2 years. Tom deflecting credit, Rebecca insisting he'd saved her life, both of them dancing around deeper feelings that had slowly developed, but neither quite knew how to address. The ranch had become something neither of them had expected. Not just a business partnership, but a real family. They had dinner together every night, made decisions together, celebrated victories, and weathered setbacks as a team. The ranch hands joked that they were like an old married couple, finishing each other's sentences, communicating with glances across rooms. Rebecca had wondered sometimes if it could be more than partnership and friendship. Tom was only 52, not really that much older, and they understood each other in ways that went beyond words. But she'd never wanted to risk what they had by pushing for something he might not want, and Tom, for his part, seemed content with their arrangement, never hinting at wanting anything different. That evening, Carol from the therapeutic writing program came by for dinner, something that had become a regular occurrence. She'd become one of Rebecca's closest friends, and she had no filter when it came to speaking her mind. "So when are you two going to admit you're in love with each other?" Carol asked bluntly over dessert, making Rebecca choke on her coffee and Tom cough loudly. "Carol," Rebecca protested. "What?" "Everyone can see it. You look at each other like lovesick teenagers. You're business partners, best friends, you live together. You've built this whole life together. The only thing missing is admitting you want more." Tom stood abruptly. "I should check on the horses." After he left, Rebecca turned to Carol, her face flushed. "Why would you say that?" "Because it's true, and because life's too short to waste time pretending you don't care about people." Carol leaned forward. "Rebecca, that man adores you. He lights up when you enter a room. He brags about you to anyone who'll listen. He's happier than he's been in years, and it's because of you. He thinks of me as a daughter figure, someone who reminds him of the child he lost. No, sweetie, he thought that when you first arrived. But somewhere along the way, it became something else, and you fell for him too, even if you won't admit it." Rebecca sat with those words long after Carol left. Was it true? She cared about Tom deeply, respected him, relied on him, enjoyed his company more than anyone else's. She couldn't imagine her life without him in it. But was that love or just gratitude and partnership? She found Tom in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal soon. He looked up when she wheeled in, his expression careful, like he was bracing for an awkward conversation. "Sorry about Carol," Rebecca started. "She has no boundaries. She's not wrong, though, is she?" Tom said quietly. Rebecca's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about this for months, trying to figure out the right way to say it, or if I should say anything at all." Tom sat down on a hay bale, his hands clasped between his knees. "When I brought you here, I was trying to honor my daughter's memory, trying to do something good in a world that had taken so much from me. I thought I was helping you, giving you a place to land. You were. You did. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about her and started being about you. Not the broken girl I brought here, but the amazing woman you became. You're smart and tough and funny, and you make me want to be better. You brought this ranch back to life, but more than that, you brought me back to life." Rebecca couldn't breathe. "Tom, I'm too old for you, I know that. And I'm probably crossing every line by even saying this. But Carol's right. I'm in love with you, Rebecca. Have been for a while now, and I can't keep pretending I'm not." The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca's mind raced, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You're not too old," she said finally. "And you're not crossing a line. Because I love you too." Tom's head snapped up, his eyes searching hers. "You do?" "I think I have for months. I just didn't know if it was okay to feel that way. If you'd think it was just gratitude or dependence or something unhealthy. But it's not. It's real." Tom crossed to her, kneeling beside her wheelchair so they were at eye level. "Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. We can't just be business partners anymore. We haven't been just business partners for a long time." Rebecca reached out, touching his weathered face with gentle fingers. "We've been family. We've been partners in every way that matters. This is just making it official." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home all over again. It was gentle and sweet and filled with all the emotions they'd been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "Well," Tom said, his voice rough, "that's going to make the ranch hands' gossip a lot more interesting." Rebecca laughed. "They've probably been betting on when we'd finally figure it out." Over the next few months, their relationship deepened naturally, as if it had always been heading this direction. They were careful around the students and clients, maintaining professionalism during programs, but everyone who knew them could see the difference. There was a lightness to both of them, a happiness that went beyond business success. Catherine had stayed in touch, calling every few weeks, slowly building a relationship with her half-sister. She'd gone back to